Hey, everybody. Good evening and welcome. My name is Maggie Marshall, and I am the co-founder, along with author Heather Newton, of the Flatiron Writers Room. And this evening is part of our Flatiron Writers Room ongoing The Biz series, which is where we host professionals from all aspects of writing and the publishing world, and in conversation and Q&A. These sessions are fundraisers, but they're also meant to be fun, focusing more on sort of the business of writing, trying to offer you as writers the information that you need to get your work out there to be read and enjoyed. Last week we had our session was about the writer-agent relationship with Zaina Arafat and Michelle Brower, and tonight we have our illustrious guests, Denise Kiernan and Joe Dagnese. I am super excited to welcome them tonight, but I want to I'll introduce them in a bit, but I just want to do a few short announcements and a little bit of housekeeping. Most of you know us, but for a few of you that don't know about us, we are the Flatiron Writers Room, coming to you from beautiful Asheville, North Carolina. We were founded in 2017 as a brick and mortar space to offer classes, workshops, author events, social and network events, retreats, and co-working space to writers. There's Joe. And we are, like everyone out there, though, we are currently operating our classes fully online. We went to Zoom in March and never came back. And the only thing we're doing in our space currently is co-working, but we hope to be back in our West Asheville wonderful arts and crafts house in West Asheville back in, hopefully by mid-2021. Let's hope, everyone. Fingers crossed. Speaking of classes, we have a lot of things still coming up. We're getting towards the end of our fall sessions, but we do have still some great classes. We have a couple spaces left for a class on Saturday that is being taught by Latria Graham called What Is This Really About? Latria is a journalist and feature writer who was a co-recipient of the very first Great Smokies National Park Writers Residency last year. And she's written a lot about the challenges faced by African Americans in outdoor and recreational settings, such as state and national parks. And she is also just recently published an essay called You Can't... Sorry, I'm blanking on that. I'm going to post the chat in the chat. I'm going to post the link to that. But it was an outside magazine, and you can also access it in our newsletter. But primarily, the class is for nonfiction writers, but fiction writers could definitely benefit too. And we do have a couple spaces left on Saturday. Then on November 5th, we have Zaina Arafat returning to our Zoom room to teach writing about identity. This is going to be a class focusing on the multiple identities and allegiances that we all have in our increasingly global world. This is something that she really focused on in her novel that just came out called You Exist Too Much. And this will be the second time she's teaching for us. And she is fantastic. It's going to be a great class. Then we have Mary Edith Burrell is coming back. And she is an award-winning writer and documentarian whose most recent work was the acclaimed documentary Raise Hell, which was about Molly Ivins. Very, very timely, certainly. She is teaching Craft of Documentary for us, and that is going to be on November 7th. And then last but certainly not least, we have Katina Baycoat teaching Writing as Social Action. Also an incredibly timely theme. That's a 3-session class, and that's going to run from November 17th through December 1st. And then those of you who prefer a non-interactive online class, we've got that covered too. We have the Writer's Welcome Kit, which is a self-paced course. It's designed to be taken over a 6-week period, and it covers the soup to nuts of writing, business, craft, process, developing a writing practice. It's great. It kind of covers everything, and you can do it all on your own in your own time. All of the information about this is available on our website, and I'm going to post, I think I posted some links in the chat early on. I'll post them again throughout. And then the one thing we continue to offer at our Covington Street address in our brick and mortar space is our writer co-working program, which is a 24-hour writing space for writers who need a safe, quiet, and socially distanced place to go write because their partners have taken over the dining room with Zoom meetings, or their kids are, playing.
I'm laughing because I know people who fall into this category.
Oh my God, it's epidemic.
Dining room. Yeah.
We thought no one would want to be coming to do co-working, and the opposite has been true. We've had a lot of people going, help me. So those of you, I'm going to do a little housekeeping here because most of you are probably, especially folks who've taken classes with us, you're used to Zoom and not so much Crowdcast, which Denise and Joe are letting us use their Crowdcast platform tonight, and we love it. It's awesome. So the first thing is you're going to notice there is a donation button. In registering for this class this evening, you have all donated, and we thank you so much. But if you decide you'd like to contribute more, say for a scholarship to one of our classes, for a student who can't afford it, or a seat in the co-working program, also for a student who may be impacted by, their income is impacted by COVID, we would love to have the help. So far, we've raised over $500 from this evening, and yes, thank you. And given last week's session of the biz and this one, we've totaled $1,200. So we thank you all for your generosity. We certainly could not do it without you, and we're so appreciative. But we can always take more because there's always somebody out there that needs it. So if you have any questions tonight, we've already posted in the chat, but if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A because it'll just be a lot easier for Joe and Denise to see them and to go through them.
Question right there.
Down on the bottom there, you want to just stick the questions in there. You can still use the chat to say hello or whatever, but that's where we want those questions. And then I'm also going to be posting in the chat because they Joe and Denise very graciously gave up their bookstore buttons for us for donations. So I'm going to post in the chat some links to their upcoming works and past and previous works. So I know that all of you know this. Most of you know our dynamic duo of the literary world and the national, both the Asheville and the national literary world. But in case you don't, I'm going to read you their bios, just so I think it also will show you how broad their experience base is and how you can just ask them pretty much anything. So Denise Kiernan is an author, journalist, and producer. Her new book, We Gather Together, arrives on November 10th, 2020. It's almost here, and we can't wait. Her last book, The Last Castle, was released in September of 2017. It was an instant New York Times bestseller in both hardcover and paperback, no surprise, and was also a Wall Street Journal bestseller. She is also the author of The Girls of Atomic City, which is a New York Times, LA Times, and NPR bestseller and has been published in multiple languages. Denise has also co-authored several popular history titles. There is Joe, along with, oh my God, right on cue, because I was just about to say, with Joe Degnes, including Signing Their Lives Away, Signing Their Rights Away, and Stuff Every American Should Know. She has been published in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, The Village Voice, Ms. Magazine, Reader's Digest, Discover, and many more publications. She has also worked in television, serving as head writer for ABC's Who Wants to Be a Millionaire during its Emmy Award-winning first season. Oh my gosh, that's like my favorite TV credit ever on someone's resume. Okay. Baywatch credit was cool, but you've got me totally scooped. And has produced for media outlets such as ESPN and MSNBC. Throughout her career, Denise has been a featured guest on many radio and television shows, including NPR's Weekend Edition, PBS NewsHour, MSNBC's Morning Joe, and The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. I remember all of those appearances, and they were fabulous. And also, something else that I'm going to post in the chat, you should know, she has been hosting a kind of a weekly In Conversation with writers called Craft. It used to be done at Little Jumbo in person, I know, and now it's here on our lovely Crowdcast. It's fabulous. I've been listening to it every Wednesday, 7 p.m. And if you go on her website, I'll post that link and you can see who's coming up next. I think it's Claudia Rao is next week.
Claudia Rao, yeah, she's amazing. She interviewed serial killers and she's fantastic.
Yeah, we wanted to get her to come and teach for us one of these days.
She's doing,
we need to talk to her. Yes, so, and that is Denise. I'm already out of breath. But then we move on to Joe. Joseph Degnes is an award-winning journalist, author, and ghostwriter who has written for the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Saveur, I don't know if I pronounced that right, This Old House, and many other publications. In a career spanning more than 20 years, which is amazing because he's only 30, his work has been honored with awards in 3 vastly different areas: science journalism, children's literature, and mystery fiction, a man of many, many talents. He is probably best known for his books about the signers of the Declaration of Independence, signing their lives away, a personal finance book called The Money Book for Freelancers, and an award-winning children's book on the Fibonacci sequence called Blockhead, The Life of Fibonacci. I have to say, I love this book. And it has, in addition to being beautifully written, it's also incredibly beautifully illustrated. It's just a wonderful book. He has won a Derringer Award for his short mystery fiction, and one of his stories appeared in Best American Mystery Stories 2015 anthology, guest edited by author James Patterson.
That young up and comer, James Patterson.
Yes, that young up and comer, James Patterson.
Keep an eye on him. Yeah.
Yep. So I'm out of breath from reading these extensive bios, but I wanted to give you guys an idea of things that, even though if you know Denise and Joe, you probably didn't necessarily know about them. So you can ask them questions on any of these subjects we just talked about or covered, any of these genres. I'm going to hand it off to them. They have been true supporters and wonderful friends of the Flatiron Writers Room. About a year or so ago, they did a weekend-long book proposal boot camp for us that was also a fundraiser. So tonight, we're so happy to have you guys back. We're so grateful that you're helping us raise money and sharing your extensive knowledge and experience and all things books and publishing and anything else anybody wants to ask. So I'm going to go away and leave you all to it because you do this kind of thing better than anybody.
Okay.
All right.
Bye, everyone. I'll be back at the end. Okay.
Okay. She left so quickly.
Thank you, Maggie. Thanks, Flatiron Writers Room. It's such a wonderful organization, and they do so much to support the writing community here. And now, because we're all forced to kind of be on the interwebs, they do a lot for the writing community all over the place. So this is great. There are already a bunch of questions in the Ask a Question section down there. We're going to start going through those. Those of you who may have seen, you can actually click on Ask a Question. If you see a question that you think is like, oh, that's what I wanted to ask, you can actually vote it. You can give it a thumbs up, and you can rate questions if you don't want to enter your own. Also, if you would like, if we see your question, we can invite you on screen. If you want to have a little kind of personal on-screen talk, you don't have to. We're happy to answer without that. And if any important links or anything like that come up, Joe and I are going to try and put it in the chat bar, which is over on the right-hand side of your screen. Joe, would you like to add anything? Or should we just get right to it?
Why don't we look at the questions and see if anybody who's asked the question is actually with us tonight?
That would be good. All right. Jody F. Jody, are you here? And would you want to come on screen? Otherwise, we can just start answering your question. Is Jody here? If you're here, you can just put it in the chat. And if you want to come on screen, we can bring you on. Otherwise, from Jody F., do I need an agent? What is the best way to begin the process of getting a publisher for fiction? So the do I need an agent question is one that I think has come up a lot more often. And I would say the last 5 to 10 years as the self-publishing realm has grown and become a little bit more viable. With so many of these things, I think it kind of depends on what your goals are. So if your goal is, it can break down to a lot of things. So if your goal is to be someone who supports themselves from their writing and they have a lot of books they want to do, the answer might be different for that person. If the goal is, I just have this one thing that means a lot to me and I want to find a home for it that a lot of people are going to see, that might change the question. And then, of course, there is, I want to make sure that it is actually in bookstores, not just available digitally online, for example. So there are a couple different ways to answer this. Wouldn't you agree, Joe?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is I think that the agent is the gateway to the big 5 publishers. in most cases.
Can you
Um,
explain what those are?
yeah, those are like if I say the name Simon and Schuster, everyone on the planet says, "Oh, who reads books?" says, "Oh, I've heard of them." Random House, Penguin, Hachette. These are major publishers. There are the 5 biggest publishers in the United States and possibly on the planet. So you're an agent. Typically, an agent is going to get you entree to those places, and they would, if they're smart, they would try those publishers first before they try any other publisher. You go big before you go small.
But this is a question about, but to do that, you would want an agent. This is a
Yeah,
question about whether or not you need an agent. Yeah.
yeah, I agree. I agree. Yes, I think you need an agent because that is the smart way to get bigger and better things. Um, there's some other questions I saw that will touch on different permutations of this, but I'll wait for that.
So you can, I mean, there are some publishers that will accept direct queries. Uh, and you can look for those online. The tricky thing about that nowadays is there are a lot of people who are presenting themselves as publishers when what they really are is what we would call a vanity press. In other words, someone who wants to get money from you to publish your book. That's not what would normally be considered, a regular publisher. The whole idea of getting into bed with a publisher is that you're splitting profits with them because they're actually putting money up front to get your work out there. So if you want to go a traditional publishing route, meaning with HarperCollins or Simon and Schuster or Penguin or Random House or Macmillan or places like that, and make sure that you are in Barnes and Noble and your independent bookstores as well as online, the best bet is to go through an agent. If we did not, so that's that. And if you have other aims, like you have a family memoir you want to publish or you want to get out in the world, you do not have to do an agent for that. So Jody, if we did not completely answer that question, please go ahead and re-enter it, and we will be sure, or post a follow-up in the chat or post a follow-up in the ask a question, and we will be sure to get back to that if I didn't quite cover your answer. A lot of these questions, and I should say that a lot of these questions, it really does depend on what you're wanting to do. Joe?
Wait, I'm going to jump in with this. I just 2 days ago, just to check this, I went online and just did a search, which was publishers who read unagented submissions. And there are numerous lists. I'm going to post a link to one from a blogger that I absolutely trust. You'll see numerous publishers on there. Some of them are actually big 5 publishers. For example, DAW, the imprint DAW, is a small imprint of science fiction and fantasy that is published by Macmillan, and they have had a long-standing tradition of reading unagented manuscripts. The catch with all of this is it might take them a year to read your book. So it's going to sit on a slush pile for a year. I think if you had an agent, the agent would be able to goad them to read that manuscript a lot faster than a year. The catch, of course, is it might take you 6 to 8 months to a year to get an agent. So it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
And it also can be, so an imprint, because Joe referred to an imprint.
Yeah.
So you have these very large publishing houses like Penguin Random House, the largest publisher on the entire planet. There are, within Penguin Random House, Penguin and Random House operate separately. Within those publishing arms, there are a bunch of different what they call imprints. Some specialize in nonfiction, some specialize in genre fiction, some specialize in how-to books, some specialize in romance. So they have all these little nooks and crannies and editors and publishers who specialize in certain kinds of books. And whether you're dealing with an agent or trying to approach an editor, one of the things you want to do is familiarize yourself with who you should be shopping your work to. And that's another area in which if you want to write regularly for a living on a regular basis, a good agent knows who those people are. A good agent will be able to look at your manuscript or look at your proposal and say, oh my gosh, I know that so-and-so at this imprint at this house is looking for stuff just like this. Okay, so we're going to move on. And if Jody F, if we did not answer that adequately, please post another part of your question. Also, this is all being recorded. So all of these answers are going to be available here on Crowdcast. And I'm also going to give it, and it's also going to be available via Flatiron. So you guys can refer to these as much as you want. 2 votes, 2 votes, 2 votes. Okay, so the one that has 2 votes. Okay, from Heather W. What are your top pieces of advice? And Heather, do you want to talk to us? Or do you want to we can just answer? If you want to come on, just put it in the chat. Heather, what are your top pieces of advice for a creative nonfiction writer who is putting together their first manuscript proposal and querying publishers directly? So in a way, that's
Denise, can you just repeat that to me? What are your top pieces of, I see it. Top pieces of advice for a creative nonfiction writer who's putting together their first manuscript proposal and query. Okay, yeah. So the biggest thing is to make sure that the proposal nails the form that is expected for a nonfiction book proposal.
I would, before you even get to that, is nonfiction and creative nonfiction. It is quite common to work with an agent, and an agent might be able to find a home for that more quickly than you can. If you're going through all that it takes to do a proposal, finding an agent to shop that proposal for you might be worth your time. So you might just want to consider that. So that kind of speaks a little bit to what we were just talking about. But Joe, talk a little bit about the form for those proposals.
So honestly, you need to make sure that you're touching on all the bases that that an editor is expecting to see for a nonfiction book proposal. A nonfiction book proposal is basically a business sales document. It's a hybrid. And on one hand, you're trying to display all your writing chops, all your creativity. At the same time, you're making a business argument for why they should buy this book. And you can't lose sight of that. What I recommend, there are numerous books right now, how to write a nonfiction book proposal. It's that simple. But please bear in mind that when you said creative nonfiction, what pops into my mind is that you're very, very close to that line between what is nonfiction and sort of as novelistic in nonfiction as possible, which is memoir, and creative nonfiction is very close to that. It is very possible that you may encounter an agent who likes the book proposal, but says, you know what, I prefer to sell a finished book. So if you're really writing something that is memoir or creative nonfiction, you need to be prepared that you may have to finish that complete book in order to get it sold.
Although that is less likely in nonfiction than it is in fiction.
Right.
With nonfiction, it is it's much more likely, it's much more possible to sell your book with a very complete proposal, as opposed to having to complete an entire manuscript, which is what you would have to do usually with fiction or memoir. And so there are a lot of different approaches to nonfiction and creative nonfiction book proposals. There are a lot of different elements. You want to be able to convey what your writing style is immediately. Like the introduction in that proposal should really capture the voice that you intend to use in the book you're proposing. Whereas other aspects of that proposal might be more business talk, like here is why I think my book is a good fit for the market, or the comparatives and competition, the comp section. Here are books that are somewhat similar to mine and were really successful, but mine is different in this sense. And this is why it's sort of like filling a niche that could be filled in the marketplace. You want to be able to have a really good, solid chapter outline, because with nonfiction, if they're going to sign you and give you in advance, give you money for a book that is not fully written yet, they want to know that you know how you are going to get from point A to point B, from the first chapter to the epilogue, and take us through whatever story it is that you are proposing to tell. So chapter outlines are very important. They're also important, I think. I mean, for me as a writer, when I get the chapter outline kind of nailed down, and it doesn't have to be particularly in depth, but if an agent or a publisher is unfamiliar with you, a lot of people have wonderful ideas, but they want to be able to see that you know how you're going to communicate that idea over a story arc for the length of a book. There are a lot of books a lot of very, very good books on how to write book proposals that give you actual outlines and approaches. This is one of those situations where the internet almost has too much information, but I think the key thing is really, to me, the two most important things are, when you open that proposal, your little introductory get to know you language, you want to suck them into your writing and the story you intend to tell. And then you can shift into almost like a more distant kind of third person. This is the story I'm proposing. This is the voice I will use. Like, are you going to be first person, or is it going to be close third, or is it going to be strictly like journalistic? And then showing, the outline, and that you have an idea about the structure. And that is something that you would also, that's something you would give an agent as well. And basically, whether it's an agent or an editor, they want to be able to pick up the proposal and go, oh, I know what this book is. I know how this book will be sold. I know where it would fit in a bookstore. They want to understand what's familiar about it, and also what's different about it, which is one of those things that makes you kind of crazy, right? Like, well, it's like this, but it's different. It's like this, but it's different. But I usually start with when I do proposals, I start with the chapter outline, because I want to know for myself, whatever my idea is, I want to know that I know how I'm going to get from point A to point B.
Okay, I wanted to interject with two things. One, my impression has been over the years that it is easier to sell nonfiction than it is to sell fiction.
Right.
Because of what you just said, in the sense that when they read that document, they're thinking, oh, I know exactly how to slot this. We had X number of examples where we sold the heck out of a book that was just like this. I know exactly what shelf it would go on in Barnes and Noble. We know how to sell this. Number two, if you've done your work really, really well, that book proposal needs to look like a check on the desk. It's just sitting there. And it's just, I just need to be able to go out there and sell it. They're going to buy it. Questions unanswered. Or wait, questions. What am I saying? What is the phrase? I don't even know. I do not speak English.
Okay, so if you write, like, there are Jane, I will actually, let me put this link in the Jane Friedman, for those of you who are not familiar with her, is one of the, follow her on Twitter, follow her blog, follow her everywhere, no matter what you're writing. She writes a lot about the business of being a writer. She also writes about book proposals. She writes about the ins and outs of self-publishing and actually like how to make that decision for yourself. She's great. So she writes about a lot of that stuff. But in the book proposal department, there are Writers Market does some good stuff. But there are also a lot of wonderful examples online of proposals that have sold and analysis of why they've sold. Okay. From Margaret B. I am most interested in how you got the attention of an agent. Joe has a very funny story about this. Over the past year, I've completely lost faith in the query system. This is a black hole. There has to be another way. I'm going to let Joe tell his story. And then Margaret, if you're interested in coming on screen and chatting a little more, I would do that, but you don't have to. But if there's something we're not addressing in your question, just put it in the chat over here. Agents finding a good agent can take a while.
Yeah. Okay. So my story was that the first agent that I ever worked with, what I did was I got a copy of the, not the Literary Marketplace, it was Writer's Digest Guide to Literary Agents. And I worked my way through the list of every single agent that was in that book. And I found which ones were doing my particular genre. At the time, I was trying to sell a mystery novel. So I would basically, I would find 12 at a time, and I would mail off. This was back in the days when you actually mail things as opposed to emailing it. Email didn't exist. So I would mail a dozen envelopes at a time with a self-addressed stamped envelope in it. And I would tell them about my project, and I'd say, here's how long it is, here's the idea, blah, blah, blah. And I would hear over the course of a couple of days, I would hear a ton of, I would say, if I mailed a dozen letters, I'd hear from 8 people who immediately said, not interested. Then the remaining people, 5 or so people, would say, you know what? I'm interested. Send me 50 pages. Send me half the book. Send me the whole book. Some people would ask to read it exclusively. So what would happen then is I'd have to send it to them and then hold the other ones until I got a response. It took me probably a whole year to go down this list. And as soon as I got the response that was no, I'd send another 12 letters in the mail. And I'm telling you, I worked my way through the A's all the way, intending to go all the way to the Z, to the agents who were named Z, I guess, like Zoetrope Agency, whatever. But the agent who actually took me on, her name was Kathy Patton. That's with a P. So you can already see how long it took me. So I had to work my way almost through more than half the alphabet. But you're right, it does feel like a black hole. You either need to cultivate a sense of patience to do this, or you can go the route of sending out your book to publishers who don't require agents. They read unagented manuscripts. Or the third route is you decide to self-publish the book and bypass this runaround. But if you do that, you are fully 100% responsible for marketing that book. So
Right,
we're going to circle back to that anyway.
Margaret's asking about how we got the attention of an agent. So you got the attention of an agent from writing nonstop letters.
Yes, exactly.
So I got the attention of an agent I had been working as a journalist, and I kept asking people I knew in newspapers, do you have an agent? Do you have an agent? Can I talk to your agent? And a lot of times people said, I don't have one, or no, you can't talk to them, or they wouldn't do what you want to do. Finally, when the first agent I worked with, and I'm on my third now, but the one I have now I've had for like 12 years. So the one I have now, I'm not going to, I love her. But the first one I actually got from cold calling. But I got it cold calling an agency because it was a very specific book that I was trying to pitch. And so the other thing I was going to say is when you're trying to find an agent, one of the most important things you can do is really narrow down which agents you are approaching. Because a lot of agents are very specific about what they represent and what they don't represent. And actually, one of the best ways to figure this out is, there are lots of, you can actually sign up online for Writer's Digest, and you can actually put in filters, nonfiction or fiction, mystery, or, diet books or whatever. Their agents can get very, very specific. But a great way to do it is if you have written a book that you think is, very similar to, Gone Girl, just to kind of go way out there. You go, if there's a book you think that your book is kind of in the same wheelhouse, get that book. Just go to the bookstore. You don't even have to buy it if you don't want to. Open it up and look at the acknowledgments, because writers always thank their agents. And that agent, was interested in representing the kind of book that you're holding in your hand. For a fact that that agent is interested in this kind of work. So that way, when you approach an agent, and you can find out online or by calling, you can call an agent's office and say, is so-and-so accepting queries from new clients? And their assistant will probably say yes, because they almost always are. Or no. How does she, I see online, she likes to be approached via, email with a, synopsis. Is that, yes, that's correct. Or, you can actually go ahead and send 10 pages. So you can actually, getting on the phone with people is never a bad idea. Someone, if it's an agency, someone will usually answer the phone. And then if you have that information about that agent, when you write your query letter, you can say, I know that you represented such and such, I love that book. I think it's similar to mine in this way, but, mine is different because blah, 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 or whatever. All of that to say that, and that's kind of getting into query letters. Finding, when you're approaching agents, like really narrowing down who is looking for you, because it's easy to also feel sort of, it is easy to feel like it's a black hole. And one of the things you have to remind yourself of is agents are looking for writers as much as writers are looking for agents, because there are a lot of agents and not everybody is, representing Stephen King. Most of them are representing a bunch of writers who may do one book, maybe two. So they're constantly looking for new voices and new people. So it can help to think that someone out there is looking for you and looking for your work. But I think a great way to kind of narrow down which agents might be good for you, in addition to all of the resources that are online and in the library, is to really look at the acknowledgement sections of books that you think are kind of in the same sort of area of the book that you are hoping to bring to an agent and have that agent sell for you in the marketplace. Okay, so if you have a follow-up, again, with all of these, I'm going to say the same thing. If I have missed something regarding what you've asked, or you want to ask a follow-up question or whatever, you can put it either back in the ask a question or stick it in the chat, and we'll get to it. Okay. Well, and this is from Alan M. What are some steps in finding an agent? So I kind of just went into some of that. If there is something, Alan, I don't know if you want to type it in the chat or whatever, if there's something that I just talked about that I didn't quite cover that you want to follow up with, just, you can actually all come online. Fantastic. Alan will come online. Yeah, we have a play up. Okay. And Alan Myers, and you're going to get an invitation. They're probably going to ask you to check your mic and your camera and all that sort of stuff. And here he comes.
Hello.
Hi, Alan.
Hello.
Thanks for
Hello.
coming on. Hi.
Thanks for having me here.
Thank you.
This real quick, I just found you two because I finally looked at the authors of this book. I've read this long ago. I'm rereading it. It's fantastic. And I thought, who are these people? And I did that this week. And that's how I found this event. And then I haven't found more work of yours, Joe, but I did find Denise. Denise, are you familiar with this work? Sorry.
That reminds me of something. I don't know what.
Anyway, I want to spend more time writing.
Mm-hmm.
I have written. I think this is extremely helpful what you're sharing for what I want to do, because I'm about monetary system education.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a CPA, forensic accountant by trade, and I look at the monetary system in a much different way than what's mostly out there. It's short, it's simple, it's basic, it is not complex. You do not need a PhD. You don't need to be a Wall Streeter. You just need to be able to understand basic bookkeeping. And I'm getting more active, and now what I'm hearing from you both, which is great, is it's not easy squeezy in that you got to put time in. You got to decide, oh, I got to keep sending out a dozen letters.
At least.
Well, that's just one time.
Time 12. That's 12
Right.
months in a year.
So much easier with the it's gotten so much easier with the internet, really, because you can send emails now. So yours would be a nonfiction book?
It is not. Let's hope it's nonfiction.
Yeah.
It's actually
Counting going on in the world. Yes.
It's actually.
Have you done a proposal yet?
I did one once. It's been a while. I wouldn't call it a book. A book is something substantial. Mine is actually, I've already written it. It's actually a pamphlet.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
It's about 23 pages long. And I take the reader, assuming the reader doesn't know anything about the monetary system, because it's not in our education. And I can tell you as an accountant, what I've learned in self-study was not in my college education, was not in my professional education. So I take the reader step by step, and we get to the ugly end. And the beauty part about the ugly end is there's actually a simple fix. You do the fix, we make major changes. So it's really a pamphlet. It's 23 pages.
Do you want, so when you were saying your question was, what are some steps in finding an agent? So do you want to turn this into a book?
No, this is all it needs to be.
Okay, well then maybe, I mean, something like that. Well then maybe, I mean, you might be one of those folks for whom self-publishing or like direct publishing might be a good solution.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, my first thought as you were talking about this is, you can take 23 pages of content and break it up into chunks and use it for the basis of your nonfiction book proposal, and propose a book that is, 60,000 to 70,000 words. Now, granted, I know maybe you don't want to do that, or not.
Yeah.
Or you figure out how to get the book you have already done, have it copy edited, have it proofread, buy a good but inexpensive cover from designers who are out there who do this for a living, and I'll give you a link to somebody that I think is pretty good.
We should definitely
And you could publish that tomorrow, not tomorrow. Give me, I want to say like 3 months from now, provided you've got it checked out.
Right.
But it could be as easy as that. Yes, there are people who are publishing books that short. They're not that expensive. You can self-publish it. But my argument to you is, if you want to be able to sell that successfully, what you really need to be able to do is turn around tomorrow and write another book about the same size, in the same series, that has the same cover, so that people who are like, oh, I bought Alan's first book about the monetary system. I just saw that he did another book about, saving for retirement. I'm going to get that too because I like it. Whatever. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
Don't,
Thank you.
Don't give up at the first one and be like, oh, why didn't it sell? You need to have a track record if you're self-publishing.
Understood.
And what you've already done, I mean, that actually sounds like actually a good fit for self-publishing, or something that you would want to distribute or sell if you give talks on this. I don't know if you do that.
I do.
Yeah. So that, I mean, that kind of thing, like if you're the kind of person who gives talks or whatever, you're up there and you're like, hey, by the way, you order right now, here's the link on the screen, or, you can scan it, blah, blah, blah. You can download it right now. But what you definitely want is, the thing about self-publishing that people always forget, and I'm not saying you're doing this, but people forget the publishing part. So you're not just self-writing, you're self-publishing. So you're in charge of the cover design, you're in charge of the marketing, you're in charge of the publicity, all of that sort of stuff. And it really doesn't take that much. There's some really wonderful cover designers. And Joe, isn't there a link we can send them out?
Yeah. I'm gonna get it right now.
Yeah.
Well, I'll jump in real quick. I already have my cover design, because I can't.
Already.
The way I say this is, I can't draw two stick figures having a stick fight, but I can design. And I've designed a few pieces of art, and I've actually had people do the artwork. And I'll show it to you briefly. I don't know if you can see it, but this is the artwork. And what you and the title of my, and I appreciate all your time, I really do. The title of my piece is Fed Ed, Fed being the short nickname for Federal Reserve System, Ed being for education. And everything in the art piece is there for a reason. And the first page after the cover is what I call key to the cover, explains what that art is telling you. But I'm real happy with that cover piece. And I really appreciate the information. I get that if you're doing a self-publishing, you're a one-person lemonade stand.
Totally. Yep.
You're making it, you're advertising it.
If you actually have an audience and you're out, you're doing talks and things like that, at least you have that kind of, you have that engagement with your audience that can actually work if you're doing something like that. So yay. Thank you.
Thank you. Real quick, if you get to the next question, which is from me, it's about, do you do interviews on your books? And the reason I ask is because I'm fortunate enough to be in media a little bit. I have a friend who has a program, live radio on Saturdays. It's called Constitution Radio. Given that this is what you write about, if you're interested in being interviewed on live radio, love to have you. And then I have my own, I was asked to take over this 2-hour time slot. It's on Patriot Soapbox. It's Sundays, 5 to 7 p.m. West Coast time. And I do interviews, one, both, either. If you want to talk about what you write, it would be, number one, to be very informative for me. And I would like to share that information. So,
thank you. That is, we both have websites, and our publicists, you can contact us through there, because they have, especially when we have books coming out, the schedule gets a little kooky, but
crazy.
Always put in requests through the website. And thank you so much for thinking of us. That's great. Thank you so much. And thanks for coming on.
Last thing, I gotta say, I've read this twice. And
we did not pay this man.
I am thrilled that you wrote it. Because every one of these people, including Charles Thompson, number 57, they're all kind of the same, and they cared, but they all come from different stories, different backgrounds, and it really makes the experience of what they did very human, very personal, and incredibly brave.
Oh,
So,
thank you.
Thank
so
you.
thank you so much for writing it. I
Well,
really,
thank
really
you.
All right.
appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're
Experience.
welcome.
Let's take another.
Take care. Be safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, so thank you, Alan. From Marilyn M, Agents for Poetry, which is a great question. The answer to that, Marilyn, when you're talking about agents for poetry, is kind of similar to the answers we've given for the other agent query questions. And I know that, and I these questions come up a lot because I know it does seem like it can seem like the most insurmountable aspect of getting published. A lot of these databases that you can find online and a lot of the books, they specifically, you can actually look for people who do nothing but publish poetry. And in fact, there's actually I think this publishers, let me see, Poets and Writers. Okay, wait, let me see if I can.
I just want to jump in a little bit. The heart of the poetry community is really in small literary journals, small poetry journals. And I think any editor or agent who is entertaining your proposal for, your query letter is going to be looking to see if you have been published in those types of journals first. So you need to have that kind of track record. But I will tell you, it is a tough market to crack. If you just go into any bookstore, if you walk into any Barnes and Noble or any independent bookstore, you will see that the amount of space, the amount of shelf space that they devote to poetry is very, very small. They usually have, whatever poet is hot right now, and then whoever is historically popular or important, like William Carlos Williams. So they always have that. So you're going to have to be a little bit more determined and a little bit more committed in your search for an agent to do that.
Yeah.
You need to have, so, you want to be mentioning in your query letter where you've been published before, how well it is received, any great reviews. Ordinarily with fiction, I would say don't even go there. It's not that kind of market anymore. But for poetry, it still is, because they want to know where you've been published before.
And it is more of a niche. It is definitely more of a niche market. And actually what Joe brought up is an interesting point. If you go to a place like Barnes and Noble or Malaprops or any bookstore and you look at the amount of shelf space that is dedicated to a particular, whether it's romance or poetry or diet books or whatever, it gives you an idea of, how big or how small that particular market is. And the poetry market is smaller than, say, romance. Romance is the largest the largest chunk of the market, period. That is the largest chunk of the book market. A lot of people
of all publishing,
even though, the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal give attention to all the literary fiction, romance kicks everybody's butt when it comes to that. Mystery is close behind. So there are just a lot more books published in those areas. Again, when looking for an agent, if you start to look at some of the journals that publish poetry, whether it's online or actual, there's still, poetry journals that get, they get mailed out to people's houses, and some really interesting online communities. It is a very tight-knit community, much in the same way that like noir fiction is. And being a part of that community online, which you can be, is also a good way to kind of network and talk to other people. Where have you submitted your work? Do you think, where might I submit my work? Do you have an agent? Have you ever been included in an anthology? I just posted a link to a database that Publishers Weekly puts out that is for poets and writers, and you can search specifically for agents that represent poets. Or again, as I said before, if you go to, if there is a book of poetry that you like, that you have seen in a bookstore, look in the acknowledgments and see who their agent was, or look on, at Writers Digest, which agents are handling poetry.
Okay.
But anthologies and getting published online, and maybe you have been, and I'm just, I'm talking about stuff you already know, but trying to get, work published in some of these journals initially is a really great way to make inroads for some of these agents as well. Joe, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say that there are examples of poets who have this amazing kind of crusading entrepreneurial spirit, and they're using social media to harness attention, and then they self-publish their own poetry, and they've gotten great. The one that everyone talks about is Rupi Kaur. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. But then she I think she has like 6 million Instagram followers, and she just posted her poetry on Instagram daily. And then when she self-published her own book, it was a huge success. And then eventually she managed to get the attention of a big 5 publisher and publish her second book that way. It sort of depends on like where you're willing to go. The advantage of poetry is that it tends to be short, and you can use that in a lot of ways to kind of get it out there across social media and Pinterest and Instagram and things like that.
Okay.
That's my 2 cents.
All right. I hope that helps. I see there's this question that addresses something that I think is really tricky. It never gets easier. From Anne, can you address balancing the reality of writing a story which has mass market appeal to publishers and writing a story which is compelling to the author?
I'm looking at that question right now to understand it better. Address balancing the reality of writing a story which has mass market appeal to publishers and writing a story. Oh, okay. I kind of know what you're trying to say. Denise, why don't you take it for a little while, but I have strong feelings about this.
So I would say that if you want to write and that's what you want to do, and ideally your aim is to write for a living, or even if it's just an avocation or something you do on the side that means a lot to you, books stay in your life for a long time, between the conceptualization and the research and the outlining and the pitching and the finding an agent and then actually writing and then revising and then the publication process. Doing all of that for a book that you don't feel compelled to write that would be a slog. Now, if you are there, now on the other hand, there are people who make a living ghostwriting. And so they are not compelled to write specific books, but they are hired to write a book that someone else wanted to write, but doesn't have the ability to write. That said, if you're going to go, in other words, if you're going to go through all the trouble of like coming up with something and pitching it, I kind of feel as though you have to feel pretty strongly about it. That said, if you are interested in writing and reading and being a part of the book industry, kind of watching what is working and what isn't, what has been overdone and what hasn't, might influence how you might pitch a book or tweak a book. And because I mean, honestly, none of us are, I don't think I'm particularly original. No offense, Joe. I don't think you're particularly original, but a lot of us have ideas that are in very similar areas to what other people are doing. And There has to be a way into the, even if the subject matter is familiar, the way into the story is yours. So when I did The Girls of Atomic City, I was not the first person to ever write about the Manhattan Project by a long shot. Many, many, many people had written about the Manhattan Project, but I wanted to go into the story a different way. That doesn't mean that I knew going in that way was going to work. But I felt it felt right for me. So if you're going to really give your all to a particular topic and a particular extrapolation of a story on a topic that may have already been covered, you want to be aware of what's going on in the industry, but chasing those sorts of things can be tricky. And this actually, and I don't know if I've answered your question, but I wanted to answer it because I thought it was so interesting. But it's one of those things you have to just kind of look at. And it actually reminds me of Adam's question about Adam R. What are the current trends in nonfiction? That is, what are agents and publishers buying and not buying? And how do you see this changing in the future? And I feel like this is kind of related to Anne's question. And Joe, jump in if you want, but I feel like they're having an awareness of what is going on in the business just by reading book reviews, or just hanging out at your bookstore and talking to booksellers. Because a lot of times what you see in book reviews in big newspapers is still representative of a very, very, very small, hanging out at bookstores and getting to know booksellers and what they hear people interested in and what book clubs are interested in can make you aware of trends. That said, if you start trying to chase a trend now, by the time you have pitched and written and published a book, that trend will be so passé.
Okay. Let me jump in on this, because a few years ago, zombies were really hot. Vampires were really hot. When Suzanne Collins published The Hunger Games, the very first one, all of a sudden everybody wanted to do Hunger Game type books about dystopian teenage fiction. When 50 Shades of Grey came out, it was like the hot thing. And all of a sudden we were getting like, these sexy erotic stories. And after a while, publishers bought them, editors bought them. But after a while, they were telling agents, you know what? That trend is totally over. Nobody wants that anymore. So they weren't buying it. But here's the funny thing. The people who were reading those books, people who are really into vampire stories, they're still reading vampire stories.
Yeah.
They're still buying zombie stories. The people who read the Harry Potter stories at the beginning are still reading science fiction and fantasy because it changed their lives. So I'm going to post this really great quote that I came across literally this morning, where this guy says, I'll read it to you first. It says, never let anyone tell you to not write something because it won't sell.
Right. Yeah.
Never decide to not write something because it has been done to death before. So basically, you're not going to care about stuff that you're writing if it's not passionate for you. So
so this to me is related to Anne's question.
Yeah, exactly.
About that balance between something that is compelling for you as an author as opposed to what seems to be appealing to the marketplace.
It has to be compelling to you.
Number one, yeah.
Number one, because this is not, listen, I came out of journalism, Denise came out of journalism. We were trained to write a short newspaper or magazine story because we could live with that story and that concept for a few days, a few weeks, maybe a month. But when it comes to books, you're going to be living with this for maybe 2 years or longer of your life. It doesn't make sense to chase a trend that you don't really care about. You want to chase something that you absolutely adore, as something that you love and that you're passionate about, because what's the freaking point?
But if you're doing a proposal and
Yeah,
you're pitching as part of your proposal, you can, by staying aware of what's going on in the business, you can take this project that you're really passionate about, but then
I
when you
just went,
get into the, why is this a great story to, why should you why should you represent my proposal? Why should you buy my book? You can allude to successful trends. So it is always good to, and trends shift so much, and it's almost hard to identify them now, because I mean, there are books that sell. I was interviewing Susan Elizabeth Phillips. Maggie mentioned this little author interview show that I do called Craft. She is a multiple #1 New York Times bestselling author many times over. Her books have been published in like 40 languages. I mean, she's unbelievable. But you go into a fancy, you go into a fancy bookstore, or you don't see her covered in the book review of the New York Times.
you don't.
See her in the book review section of the Wall Street Journal, but she sells millions of copies of books, and she loves what she does. So, so much of it is, I mean, if you're going to, so much of that, as people have said, so much of this can be very frustrating. The agents and the pitching and the proposals, and this week everybody is writing braided narratives where half of it is memoir and half of it is reportage, and this week it's zombies. It's a lot to deal with, and if you're going to kind of put up with all of that, I mean, you want to do it for something that that really means something to you.
Yeah, let me put it a slightly different way. There are two parts of your creative brain. The first part of it is your creative mindset, your creative voice. In order to be able to be creative, you have to stay in that voice, in that mind. You're like a 2-year-old who's running into traffic. I don't care. I'm going to get to the other side of the street. I'm going to be, there's a duck I want to pet on the other side of the street. Write the book you want to write. Then once that book is over, then you put on your marketing hat and you strategize, and that is a different side of your brain. If you can cultivate it, it's how can I sell the crap out of this book? And that is a different brain, and you don't need to consider both of those at the same time. Do you agree?
Except if you're doing a proposal.
Right. But what I'm saying is you chase your dream first. You chase
run into traffic.
You write about run into traffic. You chase the idea that you have that you're passionate about first. You get that down on paper. Then
it'll be easier for you to actually do that section of the proposal where you're like, here's why this would work. And then you can refer, being a student of the industry and being a student of what's selling and what's not is always helpful.
Right.
But ideally, finding the right representative who does that, I mean, theoretically, that's what agents should be getting their percentage for. That is they should be on top of that 24/7 so that they know who to, so that they know who to kind of pitch things to, where to go, what's working, what's been overdone, what's coming down the pike that maybe hasn't totally exploded on the scene yet. Because that's the other thing, like agents know books that are in the works that are going to come out in a year. Like good agents can spot trends that haven't emerged yet.
Right.
And that doesn't mean you don't run into the traffic. That doesn't mean you change what you feel compelled to write, but it means that they might be able to say to you, is there an aspect of X, Y, or Z in your book because people are looking for that now? Right. So a lot of it can be very subtle tweaking as well, which is a little different than necessarily, because if you can tie yourself into knots trying to kind of fit into what is out right now, because what is out right now was probably in the works to.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So
Right. Okay.
I
Let's
hope
see,
that helped.
let's see if we can hit a few more.
Last Castle used a wealth of resources. How did you begin the research process, and how did you organize your research? Outstanding book. Thank you. With me, with all of my books, I've got files I keep all over the place with ideas and things that come up that I get really curious about. And there are, I keep paper files, I keep digital files, I keep a bullet journal. I used to just call it a journal, but I actually am a full-on like bullet journal person now. And I keep lots of files on my computer, and I still like paper files, but if something really kind of tweaks me, a lot of times I'll start doing research before I've decided I'm going to do a book, and Joe mentioned we both came out of journalism, and one of the things that journalism trains you to do is when you get the idea for a story or an angle or something, the first question you ask yourself, because it's what your editor is going to ask you, is why is this a story? Is this really a story? Has somebody done this story? Have too many people done this story? Is there a new way into this story? And then from there, you're sort of asking yourself, well, is this a newspaper article? Is it a magazine feature? Is there enough here to hang a book on? And sometimes you'll look into things and it's hard to answer that question. And sometimes the timing doesn't feel right. But the research for me, I love research. So the research for me usually starts, I cast a really wide net, like I'll read books on something, or photographs. I love photographs. So archives, Library of Congress and the National Archives, and, major research libraries. Sometimes I travel to places to go look at archival photographs and people's papers. If you find out somebody has a really good collection of letters, that's always can be the mother lode, because then you actually get to read people's thoughts. A lot of stuff, not a lot. More stuff has been scanned, but I mean, a lot of stuff is still, you have to, try and go travel to see things, because there's just so much more that hasn't been digitized than has been digitized. There's so much stuff on the internet, it almost seems impossible that there's more that hasn't. There's so much that hasn't been digitized. It's unbelievable. Manhattan Project alone, there were like 5,000 boxes in Atlanta in the archives, and it would take me a day to go through one box. I mean, so there are like 20 books that could still be done with the files in that one archival place alone. But I don't know. I get it's a combination of book research, letter research. Photos are really important to me because I like to feel like I'm in that moment. And I love reading old newspapers. So if I know a particular story is going to take place at a particular time in, a time in history or in a particular location, I love reading newspapers from, what it like in the case of, the Last Castle, 1898, New York Times, or, the Brooklyn Beagle or whatever they had. And just seeing what was on the front page, like what was capturing everybody's attention, and what were people selling in, who was advertising, and all that sort of stuff is just, it helps you. Fiction writers, especially like science fiction and other genre writers, talk a lot about world building, actually creating a world in which the reader building out your world so that the reader really feels like they are in it. I mean, if you don't understand what it feels like to be in Middle Earth, it's hard to kind of go on that journey with Frodo. But you world build with nonfiction as well, and you can do that with all sorts, like photos and newspapers and all that sort of stuff. And I love that. So I make boards, and have giant whiteboards. I have whiteboards like the size of like an 8x10 rug that I just write stuff out on and pin things to. And then when I start to organize, I do things by hand first, and then everything gets entered onto the computer pretty early on. And I write on the computer, but I edit on paper. I print everything up and then I edit and I cut and paste and move things around because visually that helps for me. So that's a little bit how I do. Thank you so much for asking. Let's see. How do I leverage? I'm going to let you take this one, Joe. How do I leverage? This is from Priscilla. How do I leverage my first published book? Congratulations. To get a contract on a different subject with another publisher.
Okay. I saw that question earlier and I feel for you, but the reality of publishing is this. If that first book did astoundingly well, mention it. If that book did not do amazingly well, and I mean by that in the most mercenary sense, did it sell incredibly well? If it did not sell incredibly well, I don't think it should be mentioned in your proposal for another book on a different topic. What I don't know from that question is whether I don't know from that question whether you're trying to go from nonfiction to fiction or fiction to nonfiction. I do know that in the fiction world, what's that, Denise?
Yeah.
I didn't hear what you're saying, Denise.
I was going to say, if Priscilla wants to come on and chat, she can too. We can do that. But otherwise, if we're missing a part of your question, you can put it in the chat or you can just come up and chat with us. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, all I'm saying is what I don't know from her question is whether she's trying to jump from nonfiction to fiction or fiction in one genre to another fiction in genre. To my mind, there's not a huge amount of difference. If your book is sold incredibly well, you want to mention it, you want to bring it to people's attention because maybe they may be able to pitch that to their sales and marketing team. So if it has not, Priscilla is here.
Yes, she's given us a little more.
Okay, more information. Yeah.
So so the plus of this, so for historical nonfiction, or creative nonfiction, just straight up, nonfiction, you would do a proposal. The good thing would be, was it a traditional publisher? Yes.
She says it was published by a nonprofit.
Okay. The good thing that you could mention in the proposal is that you have experienced the publishing process.
Right. So, and you've experienced the publishing process. Yeah. You have perhaps an enormous group of friends and colleagues who can help promote the book and bring the book to the attention of others. You may have a mailing list of people, fans from the previous book. But, you really have to sell them on the idea. The advantage that you have with historical nonfiction is there's so many pockets of history that most of us know nothing about. And chances are you're going to be able to blow people's minds with a proposal like on a topic that I knew nothing about. And that is where I honestly have to say that often a sales track record doesn't matter as much, because if you can just blow people's minds and say, oh my God, here's this thing about American history or whatever history we're talking about that you never knew anything about, and here's why it's relevant today, people love that. They fall over it and they just immediately, they start thinking how they can slot it into their catalog.
Yeah,
you agree?
You can make relevant that, even if it's from 300 years ago, anything that you can make relevant to what's going on in the world today always helps. But also, like in your case, and I don't know if this is the case, but in the hiking book you did, if there was something you came across that felt tangential while you were writing that book that somehow plays into this other book that you want to do, that's an interesting story to share with an agent that, that you are writing a proposal for. Sometimes even if you're doing something that is a completely different topic, if there was something about your past experience that led you to that topic, that can be an interesting thing to bring up in a proposal. But for the most part, I mean, one of the better things is one of the good things about having already published a book is to be able to tell somebody, I've done this before.
Yeah, I've managed, I think she's giving us some hints. I've managed big projects before. I've handled a wealth of resources and research and managed. Yeah, and so that is all an advantage to you, and you can definitely mention it in your proposal. But remember, your proposal, that opening teaser, which is about 1.5 to 2 pages, has to suck me in and with enormous amount of detail and depth and blow my mind and say like, oh my God, don't you want to know more? And it's like, if the answer is yes, that proposal will have a chance.
Yeah, the flavor, you want the beginning. So all of these wonderful things you have experienced and that you can definitely highlight in a proposal, that's not what you would start the proposal with. You would start the proposal with whatever just captivates you about this book you want to write, because what you are trying to do is convey that captivation, convey that evocative storytelling to the agent or editor that you're pitching this to. So all this valuable experience you've had and your ability to manage a project and your experience as an editor, that is great, but that's not what you start with, because here's the other thing, editors and agents, swamped. Like they're not I mean, I will say this about editors and agents that I know, they're not laying around doing nothing. The good ones they work constantly and they have a lot of balls in the air. They want to pick up your proposal and they want to read 5 pages and go, wow, I like this writing. Wow, this is a really interesting story. They don't have to get all of it within the first few pages, but they have to want to keep reading. So all that great experience you have, and I think that can bulk up and support your quest, whether it's for an agent or an editor. But that still doesn't change the fact that whatever it is you're pitching to them, you want to just like grab them in those first few pages. But
Priscilla, definitely, Priscilla, please. There are numerous books on how to write a nonfiction book proposal. You can get them at your library if you don't want to go out and buy it. Just to nail down that structure is hugely important. But what you've already told us right now, I would want to know more about these women and I'm a junkie for medieval times, so I'm very interested in that anyway. But let's see, we're almost ready to wrap up.
People love anything that looks vaguely medieval. That's why Game of Thrones was so successful. So yeah, just use all that experience you have, use that to bulk up that part of your proposal, but just go with your heart and your passion for that beginning part. That's a great question. Thank you.
Okay, I think we should jump ahead. We're almost out of time. Do you want to take one more question or wrap it up, or do we want to bring Maggie back on to say a few words?
I'll do a couple more because some of these are sort of related. So
this is kind of similar. Pitching strategies for moving to niche to national titles, niche publications to national titles. I think it's, if you're talking about fiction, if you're talking about fiction, Annie, you would have to still do, if you're pitching a fiction book, you would still have to do the whole book. If you're talking nonfiction, it goes back to the proposal approach. Anytime you have been published anywhere, that is a great thing to mention somewhere in your query, somewhere in your pitch. But remember, if they are not captivated by, if they're not into your writing, they don't care. They
Right.
will. That sounds horrible, but they just won't.
When you're,
I
I'm
know,
assuming,
and this is terrible. And I don't think this is right, but like I know an agent who, like, if the first line of your query is "I have an MFA," they will just not read the rest because they
well,
don't. Because what they want to know how you write. And
it's really, it always comes back to the same thing.
down in the back, I've been published here, I've been published there, unless like you wrote something for McSweeney's that went viral and had like over 1 million hits. If you have something massive like that, that's, even if it's online, you know, I think McSweeney's is hilarious. I love McSweeney's, but you know, a lot of people, you know, the average person, you know, who is devouring romance novels, she doesn't know what McSweeney's is. He doesn't know what McSweeney's is, but your editor, your agent might. So, but if you've had a niche publication or something on a blog or on a site that went crazy, definitely mention that. And you want to make sure that that is something that, you know, because editors and agents will chase something they think is a very, you know, is a hot commodity. But if it is, I'm trying to move from being published in like you know, I had a great article in the Paris Review, or I got published in the Baffler, which is a really,
Yeah, they do care about that stuff.
great. They care about that stuff, but it is still, and they like that because they will feel like you're part of a writing community. So if you're talking about niche publications where you have actually you know, you're kind of a regular contributor. Like there are a lot of people in the noir. We were talking to S.A. Cosby a couple weeks ago, author of Blacktop Wasteland, and he's super involved in the noir at the bar scene. And that is a very niche scene, but it is a very tight scene, and it is there's a lot of networking that goes on within there. So if you can share with an agent or an editor that you are a part of, even if it's in a niche area, a part of a writing community that, you know, is active, and those are people that you can network with and people who can help get the word out about this book you're pitching to them, that can be helpful. But otherwise, the same, I would say sort of the same, I hope that helps. Otherwise, the same thing would kind of apply here. If it's a fiction book, you want to do the whole thing, and if it's nonfiction, the proposal. And same with pitching. So if you're talking about like just pitching a magazine, a national title as opposed to a niche publication, look at what those editors have been publishing. If you study magazines, like say you're like, you know what, I want to be published in the Atlantic. Well, what section of the Atlantic, and who's the editor for that section of the Atlantic, and what kinds of stories do they tend to do, and what is kind of like that, but they haven't quite done it yet. Because basically, if you're talking about national newspapers and magazines, these people have a lot of pages to fill to get their jobs done, and you are doing an editor a favor if you are pitching them a story they can use. So again, it's that kind of mindset of, it constantly feels like, you know, we're looking for the editor, we're looking for the agent, the editor is looking for you too. So help them do their job. Like they want to publish something that in their magazine or in their newspaper that serves their purpose, and you can help them do that. Target audience. What genres are publishing the most right now? Are editors taking risks in this coronavirus climate? No, I don't know. Do you think? I don't know. Jeff?
Yes, I mean, the only thing we definitely know is they're still working. Books are selling in all three major species, which is print, ebook, and audiobook. They're still buying books. You know, long term, I have no idea what the health of the industry is, but no one who does this for a living knows either. So I don't think, you know, I don't feel too embarrassed to admit that I have no idea either.
I don't think I don't think they have changed how they are choosing books to publish. And I am sure like 20 coronavirus books have already been written.
Yeah.
And will all come out at the same time about a year from now, maybe a little longer. So I don't think they're any more risky. They might even be more risk averse right now because the publishing world is a little bit all over the map at the moment. But I think it's pretty much business as usual insofar as what they're publishing. And as always, like romance and mysteries are, that's a huge chunk of what sells. And historical fiction, very popular as well. Any updates on publishers who accept agent-less submissions? Karen M., I feel like you touched on that a little bit, Joe.
If you scroll up in the chat, I gave you my link, which is literally 1 week old, and it lists about 30 different publishers of nonfiction, fiction, and different genres within fiction. You take a look at it, make sure that you do your research and vet every single publisher that you're submitting stuff to. You don't want to be taken by someone who's fly by night. I trust the people who've put together this list. That's why I'm sharing it with you, but I am completely fallible. So I want you to do your research as well.
Because there are a lot of people, again, like we said earlier, who are calling themselves publishers, but what they really are vanity press. So they are taking money from you, telling you we're going to handle all of this other stuff. So but there are some imprints within the big 5 publishing houses that will accept agentless submissions. So scroll up in the chat, Karen, and check out that link that Joe posted, because that definitely would be a good place to start. And also further up in the chat, I am pretty sure Jane Friedman has written about this. And there are also a lot of boards where you can kind of see what experiences people have had with that as well. And then what is the best approach? And then this will be the last one. What is the best approach to defining a target audience in a book proposal? Because that's a very kind of meat and potato sort of question. So you want, in your comp section, Joe, do you want to?
Yeah, no, the biggest thing with a target audience is to ask yourself the question, who would buy this book? And you have to look deep within yourself, which to answer the question, why are you writing this book? There must be something that ticks all the boxes for you. If you can get that down on paper, that helps. If you can find your comps online as you surf the internet looking for books that are like your book, you will find other books that are like it in your search. And then you will kind of come up with a vague or a sort of a good idea of who that reader is. And you got to be able to put it into words in a very creative way so that people are like, yes, I totally get that person. They listen to NPR. I don't know what the heck else they do. They listen to NPR. They're always the first people to buy a book about the Civil War. They love blah, blah, blah. They buy hardcover books when they come out. Whenever David McCullough puts out a book, they're the first one that they buy it in the first week. That kind of writing that kind of crystallizes for an editor makes that reader real. So they say, oh, I totally get that person.
Yeah. And it's it's that combination of this is similar to this, which we know sells, but it's different because I'm coming at it this way. And this is actually, so we have this really successful genre with a proven audience, but we haven't, kind of come into the story from this particular angle, and that will appeal to this audience. And again, kind of just studying what is working, something that is sort of in the same area as what you're proposing, and looking at how that was covered by the media, or what reviews said about it.
Right.
Study successes, like look at books that are similar to, if you're writing a book about cancer, look at what worked about the emperor of all maladies and what people said about that, or look at, why I wore lipstick to my mastectomy and what worked about that. And, look at all of these different kinds of books that have been successful, what they have in common with each other, what they have in common with what you're proposing. But then also just be sure to point out how yours is different as well. That's why it's comps, it's comparatives, but also competition. So it's like, it's a little bit of both, but that's a great question. So I'm going to bring Miss Maggie back on. Yes, there she is. And, and places like, connect these people, that are in the chat, all of you guys are interested in the same sort of stuff, network with each other, connect with each other. If nothing else, I mean, writing is a very solitary experience. You network with a lot of these people online and in different areas, you at least sort of feel like you're all in it. You're all in it together. Hi, Maggie.
Hello. Oh my God. Oh, what?
Wait, what's going on?
It's
Okay.
like the aliens are landing.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh. I wonder if I need to put.
You're blowing my mind.
That's weird. There was a thing that said tap to unmute, and I hit that. And maybe.
Yeah, I'm gonna mute you and then unmute you. Try again.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Oh. Do you have?
Plug in the microphone. Let's see if that helps at all.
It does sound like zombies. Okay, hold on. Go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're still
echoing. Oh God. Well,
Do you have more? Do you have more than one device open right now?
yes.
Oh, that's probably it.
Turn off your computer.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that's it.
Yes, that's what it is. We had the same problem. That's why I'm banished to the basement.
Okay. That must have been it. I didn't.
Zombies. D, thank you. Priscilla, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
M. Burrell, thank you.
It sounds like I'm at the Motor Speedway. Oh.
It actually sounds like you're about to be abducted. Like
There's a-
I remember the last
little thing that says
Maggie. Do you remember that
Chicago mic.
in the background?
Oh, that's so weird.
Is it your mic?
That. Yeah. All right. Well,
Okay, all right.
Oh, wait, that's better.
no, it's not my phone. I don't know what it is. I'm so sorry, you guys.
Okay, you're
Maybe I need to go out and come back really quick.
Go out and come back really quick. I'm getting rid of you. Okay, Joe, entertain the troops while we're here.
entertain the troops.
Entertain the troops. Song and dance.
I
No,
want to just repeat.
Is there anything that people
No, the biggest thing with all of this is it comes back to story. You've got to blow people's minds. Even if you're writing nonfiction, you want to blow people's minds with story. If you're writing fiction, this has to be the greatest novel they've ever freaking read. And seriously, editors today have very little patience for actually editing. So they almost want something that they don't have to edit. That's what's weird about this, right? This weird world that we're in.
I think there is a so many of these questions sort of came together, like writing about something you're compelled to write about, being aware of what's going on in the industry, but not letting it drive your decision making or your writing choices. Being sure to highlight your experience and those things that you have to contribute, but also at the same time, just being sure that whether it's in a query letter or a proposal, especially, that you really kind of showcase what you're bringing to the story, your writing style, the approach you intend to employ in whether it's nonfiction or fiction or memoir or poetry. Just be that just put yourself in the shoes of an editor, and they just want to pick up whatever that query is or that proposal and that manuscript and go, oh, I get this. I know what this
Right.
is. I know where this would be in the bookstore. I know who would want to read this. I want to know more. Like, I want to know more. So even for like, I don't do exclusively nonfiction, but I do mostly nonfiction. I read a lot of fiction. I read a lot of fiction to learn about pacing, to learn about, how to not
Suspense,
reveal
yeah.
everything, suspense. So don't be afraid also to just kind of look outside your, explore outside your world. So, if you're a fiction writer, read some nonfiction. If you're a nonfiction historic writer, read some fantasy fiction. Just everybody has good storytellers are good storytellers. And there are lessons to be gleaned from, lots of different areas. Okay, let's see if we can get Maggie back on here. If she hasn't been abducted.
Yeah,
we'll
let's see
see.
if the aliens took.
Oh,
in the space.
Oh,
my God, I was afraid we were gonna it was gonna be bad.
It was very interesting up there, but I'm back, and I'm going to write a book about it, and I'm going to have you guys help me on the nonfiction book proposal that I'm going to write.
That's your alien abduction. I love it.
Exactly. I'm coming to you, I tell you. Well, all I wanted to do was just thank you, everybody, and thank you guys. It was amazing. I kept sitting here thinking, I wish we were at a bunch of tables at Little Jumbo, and we were all just sitting and having these conversations, because I feel like we could just talk you guys could talk all night long. I could talk to you and listen to you all night long. I know everyone here could, but you gave so much of your time and your incredible expertise. I mean, I think that again, the breadth of your knowledge and experience is just so helpful to all of us, and that I really appreciate it. And I so appreciate all of you out there. Sorry if I blew your eardrums out, but I'm so grateful that you were all here. We thank you so much for your continuing support of the Writers Room. We could not do it without you. We really couldn't. So many wonderful, kind people. You give us great feedback, helpful feedback, to keep us, to try to keep making it better. Please check out our classes online. Please check out Denise's new book, We Gather Together, on November 10th. It will be released. And there's, you can just, the links are in there in the chat way up there. You can find them there. You can also just email us at flatironwritersroom@gmail.com, which is where you got your invites from, and ask us a question or ask us, anything that you need to know.
And I don't even know if I've said this publicly yet, but so the launch event is November 10th with Malaprops, and I will be in conversation with celebrity chef Rocco DiSpirito.
Oh my gosh! Oh,
so it's going to be super fun. It's going to be really fun. We're going to be
great. So the link to that is on
food. Yep.
I'm guessing on your website, which will you guys already have on the chat up there, but again, or go to Malaprops. Malaprops will have it on their calendar. Yeah. And that's November 10th. So exciting. Can't wait to read it. And please, everybody, just keep writing.
Keep writing.
Forward.
Stay in touch with each other.
Yeah.
Support each other. Yeah.
And thank you so very much. I mean, truly, we are so grateful. Everyone just, thank you. And thanks for all the great questions too. Everyone had great questions. And really, I kept thinking, oh, we're going to run out of questions. Like, no, we've got plenty to talk about here. So again, thank you. Please support your local bookstores. Please support Denise and Joe's writing, support our work at Flatiron Writers Room, and let's keep it all together.
And support each other. Yay. Yes.
Yeah, let's support each other. All right.
All right. Thank
so
you.
Much.
Good night,
Take care. Good night, everybody.
Good night, all. Thank you. Virtual hugs for everyone.